I'm filming this at 5 a.m. because they're building a building across the road from me and it's really noisy during the day, and I am already melting. It's so hot. Did you know that it's hot? Did you know the temperatures are crazy? Because if you haven't heard yet, let me... Guys, today I want to talk to you about I Will Find You, Netflix's latest Harlan Coben adaptation, because this story is so outrageous and so outlandish. Even the turns have twists, and the twists are twisted. Just hurricaning all around that writer's room. A father in prison for his son's murder receives compelling evidence he might still be alive, prompting him to escape prison to uncover the truth. If you're not familiar with Harlan Coben, he's like the Stephen King of mystery thrillers. He wrote a bunch of books and they started getting adapted in French TV in the early 2000s. And then it just kind of cascaded and avalanched. And then in 2016, there was a miniseries starring the Dexter guy with a Manchester accent. And that prompted Netflix to sign Harlan Coben a multi-million, multi-year picture deal where they would basically adapt 14 of his novels into miniseries. And somehow, I Will Find You is like the last one on that long list. Guys, the plot is so plotty, whoever was plotting it didn't even know what to plot anymore. It outplotted itself to death, only to genuinely serve a plot twist that we did not see coming. Even the writers were shocked by the end. The story is like soap opera meets Netflix budget, that it starts doing too much. Because you're watching thinking, this is confusing enough, but the series is like, no. We can outdo ourselves, and they outdo themselves over and over again. It's the type of story you have to believe in stupidity to not flip tables every 5 minutes. And even then, there's an urge. It's just so silly, it makes me want to do my British accent. But why don't I save you the 8-hour watch and tell you exactly what happens and why this twist is so ridiculous. Like, they're really doing too much. There is such a thing as you don't need to do it. So why don't you go ahead and subscribe down below if you haven't already, because you're gonna look and feel so much better. Also, I wanted to have my dogs in the background, but they're sleeping with their other dad, so not today. Our protagonist is David Burrows, a former law professor currently serving a life sentence for murdering his son. He's 5 years into it, and he tells us in a voiceover that although he did not kill his son, he has accepted his punishment because he was in the house, and he failed to protect his son from whoever snuck into the house while he was sleeping, and beat him up with a baseball bat to such an extent they had to run DNA tests to confirm who the body was on that bed. Ooh, that's clue number 1. If you have to run tests to identify the victim, someone could have fiddled with the result, right? And David has self-isolated so much that he has refused to receive any visitors in the 5 years that he spent in prison because he really wants to feel the punishment of his shortcomings as a father. And his family all believe they did it. His father, his aunt, his ex-wife Cheryl, his ex-wife's sister Rachel, they all believe that he did it because all the evidence points to it. He suffered from night terrors, during which he blacked out, and there was a key witness, a nosy neighbor, that alleges seeing David bury the murder weapon in the backyard of their house. What's worse is that David comes from a long line of police officers, and when I say long line, I mean his father. His father was a police officer, a detective, and his father's police detective partner of 20 years, Philip, just so happens to be the warden of the prison where David is serving his sentence. Convenient, he's got someone on his corner. So everyone believes that David is a monster, even David himself, but that all changes when Rachel Mills visits him out of nowhere 5 years into a sentence. And she's there because a friend of hers went to a Six Flags park and posted some pictures online, and she couldn't help but notice that in the corner of one of those pictures in the background, you can see a little boy, the same age that Matthew would have been if he had not died 5 years prior, and he just so happens to have the same exact birthmark on his cheek. How convenient is it that he has this very identifiable birthmark right in the middle of his face? That's enough to prompt David to ask Philip, his close friend, to get him the files of the case of his son's murder. He goes over the files and he remembers about the nosy neighbor that claimed she saw David bury the murder weapon in the backyard. So he calls Rachel and asks her to come visit him again because he might have some new information. Problem is, there's this guard called Ted Wesson who's been keeping an eye on David, and he just received instructions to make sure that David dies. So there's 2 attempts on David's life. First, an inmate that is really dangerous. He played Jack Hyde in 50 Shades. God, the references. David gets the upper hand, beats him up, and then the guard during the night tries to kill him too. So everybody's trying to kill David and he doesn't know why, but he speaks to Rachel again during one of her visits, and she sets out on a mission to discover what happened that night. If the body they found wasn't Matthew and Matthew is indeed alive and well, they have to find out who the body was. And she's the perfect person for the job because Rachel used to be an investigative journalist until she had to quit her job because she pushed a sexual assault victim so much to come forward and give her testimony that she ended up taking her own life. and the guilt made her quit journalism. And I, for one, agree. My God. As I said, the warden is a close friend of David's father, and he's known David his entire life, so he's on his side. So much so that he brings his son, Adam. Adam is a police sergeant, and they concoct a plan to break David out of prison, because if someone really is trying to kill him and his son really is alive, he needs to be out there looking for his son, not in here trying to not get killed. And the plan goes swimmingly well. Adam and David swap clothes, and Philip escorts David out until the fucking guard, Ted Wesson, gets wind that something shady is happening. So instead of this being a nice, gentle, calm walking out of prison and getting a few hours head start before the police start looking for him, no, it turns into a full-on prison break where David has to take the warden hostage and threaten to shoot him, and somehow he manages to escape. And he even manages to force the police to remove the spikes off the road, and then he goes in and out of a mall, and that's where he disappears. And he's picked up by Rachel. So David is officially a fugitive, and anyone helping him will be arrested for aiding and abetting a fugitive. And the FBI team assigned to his prison break is father-daughter duo Sarah and Max, a trope that I hear Harlan Coben loves to beat to death. But if Sarah starts struggling with the fact that David might be innocent and they might be chasing someone who is genuinely trying to prove their innocence, Max is like, I don't give a fuck. We are paid to catch them. We're not paid to determine whether or not they're innocent. I just love how for like law enforcement and police in general, the truth and justice are always just like these vague concepts that can be appropriated and inappropriated however you want, however you need to inappropriate for whatever you need to make happen. So David and Rachel's first point of business is going to Ted Wesson's house because he's the only lead that they have to whoever is trying to kill David. And they get there and David confronts him, but Ted Wesson is like, oh, they paid me a lot of money, I'm a loose end, I'm gonna die, you don't know how deep this goes. And then shoots himself. At this point, Sarah and Max have been investigating, and they have determined that Rachel picked up David, and Sarah was on her way to Ted Wesson's house. She sees David and Rachel run away, so now they're wanted for murder. And with their best lead now dead, they have to head over to New York because they found out that the nosy neighbor who testified in court moved away weeks later and changed her name and is now living in New York City. Why would she change her name and move away after she lied on a stand? We'll find out. And when they get to New York, Rachel reaches out to an old flame, an ex-boyfriend, if you will, the one that got away, Hayden. Hayden is this very pretty boy with a lot of money, a lot of power, and a penthouse in New York. And she asks him if she can crash in his apartment, and he says yes straight away. It seems like he very much cares for her to the point where could still be romantic. And by the end of episode 2, who is digging up the body buried in Matthew Burrows' tomb, if not Adam, David's childhood best friend, police sergeant and son of a prison warden? This is when the plot starts plotting. See, David's ex-wife, Cheryl, eventually remarried a guy called Ronald Dreesen, and she's currently 7 or 8 months pregnant with a baby girl. But seeing her ex-husband escape prison and then finding out that her sister is helping him is a little too emotionally taxing for this pregnant lady, and she's comforted in the bathroom by a woman named Gertrude Payne, this very rich woman who has a foundation, who's here at this charity event hosted by Cheryl herself. And Gertrude makes a sizable donation to Cheryl's charity to keep her very busy so she doesn't go on investigating, because as it turns out, Gertrude has this shady guy shadowing David's actions, and she's the one behind it all. Gertrude Payne. Save that name. Back to David's dad, Lenny, and his partner, Philip. They reminisce about what they actually did the night of the crime, and it turns out Lenny got home before the police, saw that his son had killed his grandson, thinking that he was guilty, but he would have never done this on purpose, probably blacked out, night terror and all that. He decided, with the help of Philip, to bury the murder weapon in the backyard, hoping that without a murder weapon, they couldn't charge David as easily. So he wanted to save his murdering son after he had supposedly murdered his grandson, even though he thought he was guilty. If you're confused, just good intentions, you know? Good intentions, bad results. But like we say in Portuguese, de boas intenções está o inferno cheio. It's like hell is full of good intentions, because it don't matter what your intention is. What matters is the end result of your action. I'm taking y'all to church now. Guys, it's so hot. I have a fan right in front of my face. Like, can you hear that? And they're then informed that Matthew's body was dug up again, and from the description of one of the eyewitnesses who saw the car leaving the scene, they deduce that it was Adam. So they confront Adam. They're like, what the fuck were you doing? And Adam's like, I wasn't the first one. I was digging up his body so we could run new DNA tests and prove that that kid was not Matthew so we could investigate further. But I got there and the coffin was empty. Someone beat me to it. So they decide to join forces and reinvestigate the case as well. So now we have a lot of investigations happening, okay? We have Sarah and Max investigating David, his prison break, and also everything that's happening around it. We have David and Rachel investigating the nosy neighbor, and we have his dad and Philip and Adam investigating the whole case. So David and Rachel pay a visit to this neighbor who is now called Hildy, but they know that the FBI is watching because Cheryl told Rachel over the phone. So Rachel goes out there to distract the FBI, and while they arrest her, David just sneaks past and sneaks into the building, and I'm like, I'm sorry. The FBI has the whole building surrounded, right, under watch, because they know that David is coming. And they see Rachel. And instead of, like, I don't know, waiting for Rachel to lead them to David, they just make the biggest fucking kerfuffle in the middle of the road, middle of the street, and they arrest her, and David just, like, happily sneaks. I cannot. So David sneaks past all the FBI, and he interrogates Hildy at gunpoint, and Hildy realizes that David didn't kill anyone. But Hildy was threatened, or rather was offered an offer that she couldn't refuse. A man showed up at her house and said that he would wipe her daughter's debt clean if she got up on that stand, and said that she saw David bury the murder weapon. And they told her, he killed his son, we just need to nail him. And if you don't, we'll kill you. So she did. But now she's realizing, maybe I shouldn't have. And the man who did that was Nicky Fisher, this local semi-retired mobster from the Boston mobster. A mobster that has a complicated past with David's father, even though David doesn't know. So, like, this mobster probably took Matthew and framed David. Escandalo. David then escapes, but not before asking Hildy to arrange a meeting between David and Skunk. Skunk is a mobster that works for Nicky Fisher. He's the guy pulling all the strings. He's like the man on the grounds. And as David escapes, Rachel is arrested for obstruction of justice because she has been in that van stalling them. And the FBI agents are so dumb because, like, they're interrogating Rachel and she's clearly giving them nothing and just killing time. And they realize eventually, wait, you're stalling. Run. But by that point, David's had, like, plenty of time to interrogate Hildy. So, like, FBI is just so fucking pointless and useless. Art imitates life. Hayden then meets David back at his apartment because Hayden saw in the security cameras that Rachel wasn't alone. But he's not even hostile because he knows David. See, 5 years prior, they met at a barbecue that David hosted. And at that point, Rachel and Hayden were on friendly terms. 8 years prior to this present time, so like 3 years prior to Hayden and David meeting, Rachel was actually helping Hayden with a speech, and it turns out Hayden had gone off the deep end, but Rachel really helped him get back on track and start working for his mother's foundation. And it becomes clear that to Hayden, Rachel is the one that got away. He even wanted to date her again, but she was like, I just don't want us to lose the friendship that we have. He got friend-zoned. And Hayden is like a very sweet guy. He really is the definition of nice guy who just helps people out of his helplessness. Generosity. Sometimes English doesn't come to me like it should. É fodido. Às vezes é fodido estar aqui a falar e de repente a palavra falha, não é? Sabem o que é pior? Quando a palavra falha em português. And Hayden is such a nice guy. Not only does he not call the cops on David, he tells David to stay at his place. And the day after, gives him his gun. The gun registered to his name, so David can go out and do crime and get his son back. So David is off to meet Skunk at the park. Guys, Skunk? Skunk has a white streak of hair, and that's why he's called Skunk. Well, the FBI has also been investigating, and they spoke to Hildy, and they are really suspicious, and they check her phone records and somehow manage to ping the location of Skunk, and they show up. But they show up too late, because David meets Skunk at the park, holds him at gunpoint, Skunk pulls out a gun, shoots Hildy dead, and then they struggle for the gun goes off again, and Skunk runs off with David chasing after him. And he chases after him and catches up with him pretty quickly because turns out Skunk was shot in the little struggle for the gun. So now David has Skunk bleeding out in an abandoned building, and he's interrogating him. Why does Nicky Fisher have my son? Why would he want to take my son? I don't even know the guy. And Skunk says, if you want to know why he would want to do that, speak to your old man. So there's something in David's father's past that would explain this. And I just love it when dialogue like this comes up. Skunk's been shot, and David's like, my wife's a doctor. Shot like that, you're going into shock. He just had to preface that with my wife is a doctor, just in case, like, the knowledge that I'm about to lay doesn't land. Like, just in case you doubt my next words, let me tell you, my wife's a doctor. And if you were wondering how rich and powerful Hayden is, he manages to get Rachel out of prison because they had her on accessory to murder. But he just pulls some strings and Rachel is now free. Also, shortly after, the FBI finds out that they ruled Ted Wesson's death a suicide, so they can't even go after Rachel again if they wanted. He then helps Rachel help David escape into safety. He is such a nice guy. He's like a keeper. As in keep him in a cage. And while all of this is happening, there's this big fat red herring playing in the background. It's this side plot where Lenny and Philip notice that the night of the murder, Cheryl was called into the hospital because there was an emergency, a bus accident. However, as it turns out, there were no bus accidents that night. And the person who called her into the hospital was her current husband, Ronald Dreesen, the hospital administrator. They then find out that Ronald was a key witness to a Medicare fraud, and he was about to testify, but then chickened out last minute because, as it turns out, Nikki Fisher, the mobster, got to him first. The puzzle pieces are seemingly coming together. Or so you think. And at this point, Sarah and her dad finally find out that David thinks his son is alive and that's why he's doing all of this. And Sarah later sees proof of this when she notices in the picture the little boy in the corner that has a birthmark just like Matthew had. It's like this very identifiable thing in the middle of his face. And by this point, we find out that Hayden, turns out, is Gertrude's son. They're the Paynes, the Payne family, very powerful, but it doesn't seem like Aiden and Gertrude are actually working together. It seems like Gertrude is pulling all of these strings against David and Rachel, and Hayden is genuinely helping Rachel, and he has no idea that his mom is involved. That's what it seems like. And Lenny is kidnapped. Now we're cooking with gas. Turns out 5 years prior, a couple was killed in Switzerland, leaving behind a kid called Martin, who later vanished from an orphanage that was privately owned by a family in Boston. The Paynes. And 5 years later, in present time, Sarah took the initiative of sending out an Interpol request with Matthew's body size measurements and everything for any potential missing children out there. And just one look at that request, and this Swiss detective immediately makes the connection that Matthew is from Boston and the family that owned the orphanage that Martin disappeared from was also from Boston. That's enough. And he's like, oop, I got it. This is it. Well, present time, Rachel has been talking to her editor, her former boss at the Boston Globe, and he has been wanting her to break this out as a news story that David is out running away from the FBI, a big manhunt. But Rachel refuses because that could put her nephew's life in danger. So this fucker goes behind her back and publishes the headline anyway because someone is going to. And that makes the FBI look bad. So Sarah and Max, pressured by their boss, this woman, who we later find out is also in cahoots with Gertrude, because everybody is corrupt, have the brilliant idea of using Skunk as bait. Even though they have him on camera killing someone in broad daylight in the middle of a very busy park, Central Park, they use him as bait. They release him and they're gonna follow him along until he leads them inevitably to David or whoever David is after. Something's gonna give. Something's gotta give. Something will give. I love it. Releasing a murderer into the streets to hopefully catch the man who's actively trying to prove his innocence. David and Rachel head over to Lenny's house to get the police files and to further investigate, because they're all just investigating, really. It's one big never-ending investigation. And to sneak into the house, which is being watched by the police, they use the bootlegging tunnels that were built during the Prohibition era that they used to move booze undetected. I love it. They sneak into the house and they find Lenny's sister, who tells them that Lenny is missing. Furthermore, she tells them about this inconsistency that they found about Ronald Dreesen calling Cheryl that night, even though there was no bus accident. But the conversation is interrupted by the arrival of the FBI. Sarah and Max, who barge in, make themselves like comfortable and start interrogating this woman who initially tells them that she doesn't know where Lenny is, but then to get them out of the house eventually tells them, okay, I'll tell you, he's in the hospital getting chemo. So they arrest her for obstruction, for lying to them when they first got to the house. They take her away, and David and Rachel decide to split up to cover more ground. David meets with Adam because he had the brilliant idea of kidnapping Nikki Fisher's daughter to lure Nikki Fisher out, the semi-retired mobster. Adam's like, please don't. Let me pull some strings and see if I can find out where he is before you go and do something stupid. But David has no chill, and he sneaks away and goes to Nikki Fisher's daughter's house and takes her hostage. And then she calls her father. 3 guys show up and she tases David. David is then tied up to a chair and he's about to be executed by Skunk. Until at the very, very last minute, like seconds after Skunk has said his last words, Adam shows up and tells him, stop it, change of plans. Nikki wants to talk to him now. So Adam's back in on it. Okay. Meanwhile, Rachel goes to the hospital to speak to Cheryl and Ronald, who turns out admits that he lied because he had a crush on Cheryl. and that's just the honest truth. He wanted to flirt a little bit with her. He got bold that night and he lied and got her there, and then she feels really guilty because she had nothing to do because the bus had been rerouted to a different hospital, but she decided to stay anyway because she enjoyed the attention of another man that wasn't her husband, whom she had grown distant from. So that whole Ronald Dreesen and the Medicare fraud and Nikki Fisher paying him off and all that was just fluff. However, Cheryl is finally convinced that Matthew is alive by looking at the picture. See, this picture is like the sisterhood of the traveling pants, of the sisterhood of the traveling evidence that Matthew was alive and David is innocent. Everyone looks at this picture and goes, oh, you know what? Actually, yes, I see the birthmark. That is Matthew. That birthmark. Imagine if he didn't have it. And the FBI has been busy putting the pieces together, and they figure out that Nikki Fisher's son, Liam Fisher, was arrested in 2016 by Philip and Lenny, and 3 months into his sentence was killed by another inmate. So Nikki Fisher's son died because of Lenny and Philip. Perfect reason to take revenge on David by kidnapping his son and framing him for his murder. And isn't it great that the FBI have been tailing Skunk, so now they know that Skunk has David and Adam is there too, and they're heading off to a private airfield that's been closed and has not even a tower for them to ground the planes. What I'm trying to say is that the FBI has all of this manpower watching Skunk, and somehow they still let him get away. And in the process of getting away, Max gets shot and Sarah really sees life flash before her eyes because she loves her father. And while all of this is happening, Gertrude has been talking to her son and telling him that he is helping a wanted woman, Rachel, wanted by the FBI. He's also helping a fugitive. So behind his back, Gertrude calls her shady man and tells him that Rachel's gotta go. And at the top of episode 6, Sarah is finally benched by her boss because her partner got shot, and they literally lost the plane full of criminals. One of them, they literally released into the wild. But guys, David is finally with Nikki Fisher, and it's so wow. Nikki takes David to his father, who he kidnapped the day before, and Nikki explains how Lenny and Philip manufactured evidence to put Liam Fisher away for a crime he committed. Let me run that back. Liam Fisher, Nikki Fisher's son, got into a bar fight, killed the guy. There were a lot of witnesses who Nikki Fisher then paid off to not say anything, and Liam Fisher was gonna get away with it until 2 detectives decided, no, Liam Fisher needs to pay for the crime that he committed. So they manufactured evidence to prove that he committed the crime that he did commit because the witnesses were all chickening out. They framed a guilty guy is what I'm trying to say, and Nikki Fisher at the time put a hit on Lenny and Philip straight away. And that's what prompted Adam, the police sergeant, to show up at his doorstep and offer to be his inside man with the Boston Police Department, effectively saving Lenny and Philip's life. Guys, that's why. And even though it hurt Nikki letting Lenny and Philip live, he did it anyway. And now he's giving David a choice. He can choose his dad or his son. Can't have it both ways. So if he wants to see his son, he has to give the go-ahead to killing his dad. And Lenny tells his son, do it. I'm dying of cancer anyway. Get your son back and tell him to keep practicing. I love you guys. So David says, okay, kill him. I'm laughing because it was all just a big silly prank, guys. Nikki Fisher just wanted to make sure that David really is innocent because turns out Nikki does not have David's son. Yes, he paid off that witness to make sure that David ended up in prison, but that was more payback for having his son also end up in prison for manufacturing evidence. Hypocrisy is what he's against, but he doesn't kidnap kids, so now we know. He even gives David some sound advice. He's like, you're looking at this all wrong. Like, you keep being so obsessed with you and why they would take your son, but he's not just your son. Think about it deeply. Go back to your memories and what's happened in the past. I'm sure you're going to find a reason why someone might have taken him. And he does. That really lights up a bulb in David's mind. And Rachel has been trying to access these pictures of this event at the Six Flags where the picture was taken. See, she finds out that Six Flags was actually rented completely in its entirety by the Payne Foundation, one of them. Like, one of the Payne companies rented the whole space. And there's official corporate photos on the website, except for a few of them that are missing. So Rachel, with the help of Hayden, manages to get in touch with a photographer and requests those missing pictures. But before she can get anything back, Shady Guy tries killing her, killing a cop in the process. And when the police show up and interrogate this guy, turns out he's a police officer himself. Everyone is corrupt. And now the official story is that David killed this cop and is now on the run, like more charges thrown against David. But Hayden helps Rachel escape. Once again, Hayden is there like the nicest guy possible. He's always just helping, despite his mom being very, very vehemently against it. And he's scared for Rachel and offers to get her to safety and hire a bunch of private investigators that can finish off the investigation for her. But before this can even get to anywhere. David calls Rachel and says, Matthew might not be my son. Dun dun dun. Turns out early on in their marriage, they were trying to get pregnant, but they weren't succeeding. So Cheryl, behind David's back, went to a fertility clinic. Rachel knows about this, but she's like, oh no, I think she only had a consultation. And David says, yes. But what if she didn't, and what if she lied about it? And now the donor is somehow back to get his kid back. Back to back. And the fertility clinic just so happens to be owned by Payne Medical. Payne, part of the Payne Foundation. These guys own everything. So Hayden takes them there. It's the weekend, but he has the keys. He can't break and enter into the building that he owns, right? Right. They go through the records and there's no record of Cheryl having ever been there. She has no account in this company, which is really weird because they know that at least she had a consultation. She should have an account. Maybe someone erased it. And then Hayden remembers that 5 years prior, there was a scandal of a doctor that worked for this fertility clinic that was inseminating women with his own sperm without their knowledge or consent, who was then fired in a massive scandal. And his mom, Hayden's mom, just covered everything up like she always does, and she was very thorough. A doctor inseminating women with his own sperm. It's fucked up because this happens in real life. There's a documentary of a guy who was trying to populate the world with his seed, and it's... And guys, you're never gonna believe where this doctor works. In the same hospital with Cheryl. Oh, the twists and turns can't stop twisting and turning. So episode 7 rolls in, and the police get to the fertility clinic and arrest Hayden, all while David and Rachel escape through the back. But don't worry, Hayden's mom gets him off again with just a deal that he has to strike, basically. David and Rachel then force Ronald Dreesen to help them sneak into the hospital because it's all for Cheryl and for Matthew, guys. They want to find the kid, and imagine how much of a hero Ronald would be if he helped his wife find her first son. And they're in the hospital hoping to confront this doctor that's been spreading his seed. But Cheryl gets a whiff of what's happening and shows up to clear things up. Yes, she went through the procedure. No, that doctor was not hers, but also she took an early pregnancy test and found out that she was pregnant way too soon, which means that when she had the procedure done, she was already pregnant without knowing, which means that the baby is definitely Matthew's. Also, the reason why they couldn't find her account in the fertility records is because she used Rachel Mills's name so that no one would ever find out that Cheryl had gone to a fertility clinic. So, like, Cheryl got fertility treatment. She got like IVF done or something with a fake name. How does that work? Do they not like check your identity when you literally have like invasive medical procedures done to your body? Because I'm sure that to get this procedure done, you have to like take hormones first to like prepare your body for like, right? No? Am I Nonetheless, she did the procedure with a fake name, and that's when the pin drops. But before we get to the pin drop, because a lot is happening at the same time, on the other side of the aisle, Sarah's finally been fired because she requested a DNA test to determine whether or not that body was Matthew's, but she does not give a fuck. She finally links up with this Swiss agent. He shows up, he's ready to help. And they concoct this funny plan where Sarah goes to the hospital looking for David, and this agent is going to go over to Gertrude's house to intimidate them. And even though they don't have any proof of their direct involvement, that doesn't stop the Swiss agent from getting inspiration and deciding to rattle their cage nonetheless, insinuate they have more evidence than they do to see if Gertrude slips up maybe. And he intimidates her with Hayden in the room. He also says that Martin had a very rare genetic disorder, and it's going to be super easy once they analyze the DNA they have in evidence against that rare genetic disorder to prove that that boy is Martin. Isn't it so convenient that one of them has a birthmark on his face and the other one has a rare genetic disorder, very easily provable with DNA testing? Brava. Harlan Coben really throwing us these whoosh, twists and turns and making us trip. God, I almost fell out of my chair. I'm so sorry. So back to Rachel and Cheryl and David, who are having this pin drop moment. Rachel realizes whoever took the child, Cheryl and David were not the target. The target was in fact Rachel. She then receives the missing pictures that she was waiting for, and who is holding Matthew's hand if not Hayden? Dun dun dun! The nice guy who put himself at risk at every step of the way. The guy who lent his gun to David for him to go out and commit crime. The guy who literally helped Rachel discover where her nephew is despite being the one holding the nephew is the guy who committed it. And then as the Swiss agent is leaving, Hayden bashes his head in, kills this agent who is here on official business. Like what? He's not arresting you. He doesn't actually have evidence. He's there to scare you, and your instinct is to just kill him. You don't even know who knows that he's here. And that brings us to episode 8. It's a really funny conclusion. The gist of the fucked upness of the case is Hayden was really in love with Rachel and he wanted to get back together with her, but she didn't want to. And then he found out through the assistant that works at the fertility clinic, because his family owns the fertility clinic, that a woman called Rachel Mills had just created an account and was seeking treatment. So Hayden, wanting to start a family with this woman, even though they're not in a relationship, even though she doesn't want to be with him, pulled some strings and made sure that the woman getting the treatment would be inseminated with his semen. Because if he couldn't be with Rachel, and if Rachel was gonna have a son by an anonymous donor, it was gonna be his fucking son. But then he realized that Rachel didn't go through with it, that it was Cheryl, her sister. And then when he was at that barbecue 5 years prior and he finally met Matthew for the first time, he saw him and he just couldn't shake this feeling that that was his son. He thought that he didn't care, but like he saw the kid and was like, no, man, that's my blood. I gotta get that kid. So he's the one who got Martin from the orphanage, murdered Martin basically, and then took Matthew. And his mom then ran DNA tests to make sure that that was a pain, you know, a child, an heir to the empire. And she found out that no, that son is actually not Hayden's at all. He's Matthew and Cheryl's son. But the damage was done. You know, at that point, Hayden had already killed a kid, kidnapped another, so she burned the DNA evidence proving that the kid was not Hayden's and hid it from her own son for his own good, because he's impulsive and he's a bit of a reckless agent in his own life. Well, ladies, gays, and theys, the plan to get Matthew back is as crazy as it is stupid. Rachel gets her old boss to put out the news that David has been arrested and then calls Hayden and says, oh my God, David's been arrested. I really need you. I want to go away with you. I want to take you up on your offer, please. And Hayden's like, okay, cool. Come meet me in my house. And Gertrude is like, are you dumb? Because the kid that she's been looking for, her nephew, is literally upstairs packing his bag for us to go away as we speak. And Hayden's like, no, Mom, I really like her. I'm gonna make this work. Okay. She gets there and he's like, you know what? We're gonna go away, yes. But then Gertrude's like, she's lying to you. David's not been arrested at all. And then she tells him the truth. Matthew's not your son, Hayden. You kidnapped someone else's son. And Hayden realizes that his mom knows the truth and didn't tell him. And what does he do to his mom? The one person who's been getting him out of trouble this entire time and covering up all of his crimes? He shoots her dead. Yeah. Sarah and David then show up. They join forces and they're shooting their way into this mansion, and Sarah kills the shady guy. Yes, good for you. Hayden then takes Matthew at gunpoint and gets him in the car, but then the kid escapes and he runs after the kid, and David runs after them as well. And then in the end, David gets shot, but then Hayden also gets shot. So Hayden dies. And Matthew is alive, and David is in a really bad condition, but Rachel helps save him. 8 months later, we're at Lenny's funeral. He finally died of his colon cancer, but he still had 8 good months spending time with his grandson. And somehow, some way, you know, the whole time, Rachel and David were getting very close, and there was this like tension. Are they gonna get together? Are they not? But then like Hayden came into play, and then David is like this very one-dimensional character who only cares about finding his son, putting everyone around him in absolute danger, being incredibly reckless. Like the entire time, it's shocking really that he managed to evade the FBI and the police for so long, because he's really, really bad at what he does. And I was watching thinking they're not gonna get together, surely. But no, lo and behold, 8 months later, they hold hands. I guess they got together. I guess in the end, they found each other. Also, Rachel wrote a book called Found, because they found Matthew. They brought him back. And Matthew still doesn't remember anything from his early childhood, but he's doing his best and he seems happy. Of course, it was very traumatic seeing the man he thought was his father get killed right in front of him after threatening him with a gun, but let bygones be bygones, right? Sarah got a promotion. She's now the head of the division that she used to work under, and her father, who's now retired, pops up every now and then to you know, spend more time with his daughter. And that's beautiful. And that is I Will Find You. And he did find you, him. He found him. Yeah. Guys, what a story. What a story. It starts off with a man who's in prison for killing his son, but then turns out he didn't kill his son. And then it was the Boston Mafia. And then it was his best friend, childhood best friend. And then his father and his father's best friend also had a hand in it. Then it turns out it wasn't the mobster. And it was all a fertility clinic mix-up where Hayden kidnaps his son thinking that it's his son after he found out that Rachel got fertility treatment, which she didn't. It was her sister using her name. And that was after Hayden got the doctor to inseminate her with his sperm. Guys. But you know what? It's such a popcorny, popcorny thriller, mystery, popcorny, entertaining piece of garbage. I love it. It's nonsense. Just doing shit. And if you also enjoyed just doing shit, then go ahead and subscribe down below, because we're at the end of the video. Nothing else to add. Oh my god, my English. My English is not so good, but I'm not even English speaker, so I'm dumb. Subscribe down below, like the video if you liked it. Like it if you didn't like it. I dare you to like it regardless. And also comment down below. Did you watch the show? What did you enjoy the most? Funny thing, isn't it? If I had a nickel for every time that Sam Worthington is on a desperate journey to find out what happened to his child, I'd have 2 nickels. They both came from Netflix, which isn't a lot, but it is fucking weird. I also love Sam Worthington's career, that he's, you know, he's Jack Sully fighting all these aliens in Pandora, and then every now and then he just drops by to do a little mini-series or a little movie here and there. He keeps it interesting and fun, you know? I also imagine that with Avatar salary, he can literally do anything and everything. Like, he doesn't have to do shows for money, like he can just not. But he chooses to anyway. He chooses to grace us with these beautiful works, and I, for one, am very grateful. Thank you, Sam Worthington. Audience, everyone say thank you, Sam Worthington. But more importantly, thank you, Harlan Coben, for keeping us fed. Yes, Daddy. What? Also, quick few updates for people that have been asking. I'm not going to do the Vampire Lestat episode by episode for several reasons. One, copyright is really intense. But also, I've realized that I don't know enough of the lore to be giving, like, the commentary that I know the audiences of the show deserve. Like, with Euphoria was one thing. I knew the lore, and also, who gives a fuck about the lore? It was so stupid. But with the Vampire Lestat, like, I feel like, no, it deserves a better treatment. So I'm going to save my final thoughts for once the season is all out, and I'm going to give my general review of the season. Apologies for anyone who was expecting episode by episode, but them's the cookie crumbles, the cakes, the cards, how they fell. Don't make no sense, but yeah. And until next time, stay safe, stay sane, stay stupid, stay stuttering. Bye, guys.